Say, dirtbag. This is Kid Shriner, the voice of the Green Arrow.
This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman.
You are listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Now I need to go fight some crime.
Beware my path.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 207 of the DCAU Review. I am Liam, and with me, as he always is Cal. Cal, we are back with yet another character spotlight episode to finish out April. And this time we aren't necessarily focusing on one singular character, although one character will probably dominate our conversation today. But we're looking at a whole host of characters from the DCAU.
That is correct. Liam, we figured for our latest Spotlight episode, we would go way deep into the far reaches of space. You know, the new frontier, if you will. That's right. We're talking about space cops. Oh wait, that's not what they're called. It's a far more catchy name, the Green Lantern Corps. And of course, highlighting and zeroing in on the DCAU's most prominent and likely popular, dare I say, Green Lantern, that being Jon Stewart. So we're aptly calling this episode, this DCAU Spotlight episode, Jon Stewart and the Green Lantern Corps, Volume 1.
That is right, Cal. So we will be looking at appearances from not only Jon Stewart, but we'll also talk briefly about Kyle Raynor, the first Green Lantern to appear in the DCAU, as well as some of the other sort of supporting characters that show up. And we will be going all the way up through the end of the first season of Justice League. So we'll kick it off here. We will make note here. Jon Stewart, his first appearance in the comics was, of course, in Green Lantern number 87. Which was by Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams, and Dick Giordano. A huge important character. The character just celebrated its 50th anniversary last year, so a character that's absolutely had some staying power there. And then as we get right before we start talking about the first Green Lantern appearance in Superman the Animated Series, actually is where they debuted. We will mention that Kyle Raynor first appeared in Green Lantern Volume 3, number 48, by Ron Mars, Bill Willingham, Romeo Tangal, Robert Campanella, and Anthony Tolan. And speaking of Kyle Raynor, we will start here. As mentioned, Cal, our first episode of any of our DCAU shows that featured a Green Lantern is the Superman the Animated Series episode In Brightest Day, and we get the origin story of one Kyle Raynor as he finds the ring, fights Sinestro, meets Superman, and discovers this greater destiny for himself.
That's right. Well, actually, I'm going to challenge that because technically the first Green Lantern that we meet is Abin Sur, who, of course, appears in this very same episode, all technicality. So he doesn't, it's sort of the classic Hal Jordan Green Lantern origin story adapted for a more modern audience, with Kyle Raynor obviously being the Green Lantern of the comics of that time. Just briefly touching on both of these Green Lanterns, we'll talk obviously more about Jon Stewart once we get past this initial appearance from Kyle Raynor. But Kyle Raynor was definitely the Green Lantern that we followed when we were growing up. He was definitely prominent. There was a lot more paraphernalia and merchandise featuring Kyle Raynor as we were growing up. Kyle holds a dear place in my heart and your heart, I know as well. We were not Hal Jordan was a villain sort of when we were growing up. So especially when we were old enough to sort of appreciate the comics a little more, the Parallax character and his sort of heel turn, if you will, was definitely more prominent. So Kyle Rayner was the more memorable Green Lantern. So I do remember being excited to have Kyle show up in Superman the Animated Series, and of course that episode introduces him as a artist working at the Daily Planet. So you have Kyle Rayner's origin stories of him being this artistic mind, and you sort of mash it into the Superman the Animated Series world, and then you combine that with the classic Hal Jordan story with Abin Sur coming to Earth, crash landing, and in dying and telling his ring to go find somebody worthy, and it happens to end up in the hands of Kyle Rayner for this episode.
That's weird. Someone's been eating Cracker Jacks. Ah! Raynor! There you are. I've been looking all over. Are you okay? Yeah, sure. Well, you better be. I need drawings of the shuttle, front page spread, cross sections, burn areas, wing damage, the whole enchilada. Raynor, are you with me? Sure, Chief. Front page, enchilada. Then what are you still doing here? Artists.
But this one's a fun one because we get a little bit of Superman mixed in with the Green Lantern storyline. I think when we talked about this when we actually reviewed the episode, which if you are curious and you would like to hear our entire review of this episode, you can always go back in the archives on your favorite podcast app or at DCAUreview.com and check out episode 122 to get our full thoughts of that episode, Liam. But what was interesting is you have Superman as a supporting cast. In a way, it felt a little bit like a classic backdoor pilot is what they call them nowadays, where something was sort of meant to be a pitch perhaps for a future DCAU series. But this is the one and only appearance that we get of Kyle Rayner in the initial few rounds of the DCAU. Of course, he would make appearances later that we'll talk about in a later volume of Green Lantern coverage here. But it's a fun episode. We get a little bit of battling because Sinestro also makes an appearance, maybe the most famous and classic Green Lantern villain of all time, makes his appearance here. And it's a nice little fun time here as we learn a little bit about just how closely this Green Lantern follows the comics origins and perhaps previous incarnations in the cartoons like Super Friends, but with a more modern twist with the modernized characterization of Kyle Rayner and his creative mind, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really fun episode to watch for all the reasons you mentioned, both for our personal love of the Kyle Rayner character, and it's a great like Green Lantern 101 story. If you don't know much about, especially the whole core and all of that, there's kind of the plot centers around Kyle is chosen by the Ring and is sort of dealing with discovering his new powers while also having to fend off Sinestro. And meanwhile, Superman is sort of learning about this Green Lantern Corps and is being sort of charged by the Guardians of the Universe, who of course sort of endow all of the Green Lanterns with their power. Sort of explaining to Superman what exactly is going on, this galactic peacekeeping force that the Green Lanterns are.
The Green Lantern Corps exists to promote order and justice throughout the universe. Recruits from all sentient interplanetary species have answered our call.
We have entrusted each Green Lantern with a great power. A power which all have used wisely. All but one.
Sinestro?
When we determined that he was unfit to wield the power, we removed it.
But he found another source.
Abin Sur was not the first of his victims, and with each ring he destroys, Sinestro gains power.
No Green Lantern can defeat him alone. He needs you, Superman.
Help him. Help the Green Lantern.
He must now take this battery and go help Kyle fight off Sinestro, who is sort of this disgraced former Green Lantern who lost his green ring and found a yellow one instead. And you have Superman come back and he's sort of dispatched by Sinestro, and then you have Kyle finally embracing his destiny and is able to defeat Sinestro, and we sort of live in a happy ending there. As we said, we don't get a lot more Kyle in the DCAU, but we do get kind of a nice send off for him here, as he's still not sure at the end of the episode if he's worthy of this, if he's a guy. He talks about being this guy who imagines in colors and forms and thinks about art and all of these abstract concepts all day, and he's not sure if he's ready, but Superman and the Guardians assure him that he is the perfect man for the job, and we sort of see our heroes fly off back toward Earth. So it's a great little piece there, even in a bubble, even though it is obviously part of this big giant DC animated universe.
We are grateful for your help, but there is much work for you on your home planet, Green Lantern of Sector 2814.
No offense, but you guys can't be serious. There must be someone better suited for the job. Like him.
The ring has chosen you, Kyle Raynor.
But I'm just an artist. I doodle in the margins of notepads. I daydream about color and form and monster trucks. I live half my life in a fantasy world.
You sound perfect.
Absolutely. It's a lot of fun. And like I said, I encourage you to go back in the archives. It wasn't that long ago. I guess, coming up, I guess, almost on 100 episodes ago in a few weeks here. But you can check it out in the archives. It's a fun episode to revisit, one that's an enjoyable 22 minutes to pop in if you're interested. And you get some good clean fun there with Green Lantern. And as you said, it's a basic Green Lantern story that involves his most famous arch nemesis in Sinestro with the yellow ring. So easy storytelling and a fun one at that.
Absolutely. And before we get into our main Green Lantern, Jon Stewart, and all of his season 1 of Justice League Adventures, we will mention that in the real world chronology, there was another Green Lantern seen in the DCAU beforehand, that of course being the Green Lantern of the future in Batman Beyond, The Call parts 1 and 2, which is not an episode we've covered yet. So we will save that for a future volume, but we did see a glimpse of what the Green Lantern Corps will be like in the future. If you have a young child named Cairo is wielding the ring at that point. But our next look at the Green Lantern is, of course, in the debut episodes of Justice League Secret Origins, which of course debuted as sort of a television movie, even though it was made up of 3 individual episodes. But you do have Jon Stewart debuting in part 2, technically, of that, of course, also appearing in part 3 there. And he, like that episode, it's mostly a Martian Manhunter, Batman, and Superman focused story with a little bit of Wonder Woman sprinkled in. So there's not a ton for Jon to do there, but we do get the introduction of Jon here, and we do get some pretty iconic moments, both him catching the bat plane out of midair as he makes his first on-screen appearance, and then later in part 3 we do get to see the first of what would be many pairings between him and Wally West, the Flash.
Yeah, I think the one that stands out is definitely his first appearance in that second part. As you mentioned, part 1 is mainly a Batman Superman story. Part 2 is where we get the tail end of part 1 is where we're introduced to the Martian Manhunter, and then in part 2, as Batman and Martian Manhunter are escaping, they're being pursued and attacked by they're not the White Martians, they're those alien creatures that invaded the Earth. And at that point, it's awesome. The bat plane is headed down, and then you just see this green glow encase the entire bat plane, and Batman sort of reacts incredulously and is confused as to what's going on. And I love Martian Manhunter's line. He goes, "Help has arrived."
What happened?
Help has arrived.
And that's where we get the introduction of the Green Lantern. And he actually apologizes for being late. He was helping out on another sector, and then he actually gets the introduction, or he along with sort of gets stood up or overshadowed in the rest of the battle, because we have the introduction of Hawkgirl, and also, of course, Wonder Woman making her appearance as well. So alongside the Flash, so we do get the whole team there sort of uniting in one scene. And but Green Lantern's save of the Batplane, I thought was great. But as you mentioned, you do get the first sort of pairing of Wally and Jon together, and that of course would become a hallmark later on in the series in several episodes, and their relationship and their friendship. And this is a good episode to lay the foundation of them working together, I thought.
Yeah, you set up the archetypal buddy cop thing, right? You got the Jon Stewart, especially I think in these earliest episodes, very much is played as the ultimate soldier, the guy who's going to do everything by the book, and no nonsense. And then you have this complete comic relief, sillier character with Flash, and of course those opposites are going to attract in that way, and that sets up, as you said, a fun pairing. And speaking of that pairing, that would move us on to the very next episodes, these which would be in Blackest Night parts 1 and 2. It did not take Jon very long to get a full spotlight for himself, as across these two episodes we see some mysterious robots attacking a local town, and we come to find out very quickly that they are searching for none other than Jon Stewart himself, who has sort of gone home and is meeting up with some old people from his neighborhood that he recognizes, as he sort of is not sure if he still fits in here on Earth. And once we see these manhunters coming, we find out they're coming to collect him and to arrest him for with a pretty serious charge of his actions causing the destruction of an entire planet. And right when the League seemingly wants to get involved and wants to stop Jon from being what they believe to be railroaded, he informs them that no one is lying, and that he did it, and that he is guilty. And that sets up a pretty dramatic part 2, as the Flash, Superman, Hawkgirl, and Martian Manhunter are all sort of trying to figure out how exactly they can help Jon, especially when he doesn't believe that he deserves that help or needs that help. As he tells the Flash that everyone here, especially superheroes like them, need to be held accountable because they have too much power not to be.
Yeah, it's a great honestly, looking at it now, especially through, and not to stand on a soapbox or anything, but it's interesting looking through the lens of present day, the modern climate of the world, and certainly here in America, talking about holding those with the most power accountable for their actions, and how this was an episode in 2001 and this was something that was being addressed, and by this character who is known as the police force, the space police force, essentially. So very, very interesting that this was commentary that was being given, and that Jon, it really, honestly, it shows a lot about Jon's character.
Now I get it. You wanted to clear your name. That's why you didn't put up a fight back on Earth.
I told you to stay out of this.
That scum's an obvious liar. Give me 5 minutes alone with him. I'll get the truth.
Hawkgirl, Flash, all of you, listen to me. Nobody's lying. Do you see that? I did it. I'm guilty.
I feel like out of most of the characters, we already knew who Bruce Wayne and Batman was, so we didn't have a lot of fleshing out of that character to do. We didn't have a lot of fleshing out of the Superman character. Both of those guys had their own series. We didn't need to learn more about them. We knew who they were. Mm-hmm. And even if you have just a rudimentary knowledge of DC heroes, you know who Batman and Superman are. So what these episodes, especially early on, I felt did such a great job of doing is laying the foundation of Jon Stewart and humanizing him. He's not just a space cop. He's not just a guy with a powerful ring that can create anything that he thinks of. He's a human being. We'll see later on, we see in this episode him in his hometown and connecting with people in his own community and trying to fit back in after not after being sort of well known as the Green Lantern now. And, we learn later on, of course, in other episodes, his heart as a soldier, a former Marine, and, his love eventually that sparked for Shira and all of this. So you really learn about him as a character, and they really humanize him and his heart here to admit when thinking that he's wrong. Of course, we learn that it's all a ruse, in fact, and it was a complete setup by the Manhunters in an attempt to overthrow Oa and distract and cause Jon to be distracted and to be put on trial here. But it's him willing to own up to his mistakes. Really, I feel like puts a human element into him that really developed this character that I feel like a lot of people, including myself, didn't know a lot about this version of the Green Lantern. So when you set out on this new course and you're introducing this new character, it would have been very easy to make him a one-dimensional, he's the Green Lantern, he's a guy with a ring, and that's all that we know or care about him. But the fact that they did such a great job of humanizing him and making this character right from the start here, as you mentioned, very early on in this series, kicking off, showing what type of man the character Jon Stewart is, I think is just so great and speaks to how well this character was written throughout the entire series. I encourage you, if you're interested in hearing our full review of this episode, you can head way back in the archives at DCAUreview.com or on your favorite podcast app. This would be episode 31. Secret Origins, by the way, if you want to hear our review of that, was episode 30. So definitely check that out, Liam. It's a fun one, and it sort of all culminates with this incredible battle on Oa between the Manhunters and the what's left of the Green Lantern Corps here, as Jon sort of has to figure out a way to overpower this army of Manhunters with the help of the Justice League.
That's right, Cal. As you mentioned, we do get some other Green Lantern, other members of the Corps are their first sort of present at the trial with Jon Stewart, and they're all sort of very publicly washing their hands of him.
Not a great first impression of unity in the Green Lantern Corps. I'm not gonna lie.
Right. That's right.
But you get Hawkgirl calling them out pretty early on there, which is really great. But these guys aren't very likable. I'll say that.
Absolutely not. Yeah, they very much quickly set up that the Green Lanterns are very willing to throw Jon under the bus and let him be punished and because the institution is what is important. Is sort of the implication here, and that if Jon goes down, that's fine as long as he doesn't take the whole Green Lantern Corps with him. But yes, as you mentioned, Cal, we have Gallius Arcus Chummick Kilowog making his debut. He is sort of the one Green Lantern who does stand by Jon, as well as Larvox Tomar Ray, also making appearances in this one. Another slew of classic Green Lanterns from across the years in the comics there. But as you mentioned, they're very unwilling to stand by Jon at first and have a nice big bar brawl with Hawkgirl for their troubles before, as I said, ultimately Kilowog is willing to sort of go back with them, and then they do sort of come back and help Jon and the Justice League fight the Manhunters at the end of the episode. Though ultimately, and this is probably, if there's one thing you'll remember above all the other moments that we've certainly talked about and enjoyed, it is the moment where we get, as far as I know, the only time we see on screen Jon Stewart doing the Green Lantern oath. And it's the ultimate oath, that he has to not only absorb enough power to power his ring, he has to absorb all of the power from the giant central power battery. All of the power from all of the Green Lantern rings across the cosmos has been absorbed by this one lead manhunter. And he has to absorb all of that energy in one beautiful, bright, visually stunning sequence as he absorbs all of that power into his ring and then fires it out to recreate the power battery. So it's a really stunning way to end the episode.
No!
All is lost.
Not while I'm standing. In brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light!
Yeah, it's arguably one of the coolest visuals that they give Jon, especially in that first season.
Absolutely. And that's a Hall of Fame moment for Phil Lamar. Certainly we'll talk about him a little bit more depth in a few minutes here. But moving on to our next episode of Justice League we had to cover. It was the very next episode in the series, The Enemy Below, parts 1 and 2, which of course reintroduced Aquaman to the series and sort of was seemed to be this ongoing conflict between Atlantis and the surface world. And Green Lantern is very interesting. Again, you go back into the sort of the hardened military man, very much treating Aquaman as an enemy combatant, as it were, and very concerned about what Aquaman could be up to, as this nuclear submarine has been damaged by the Atlanteans, and then of course he has sort of a more direct physical confrontation with Aquaman before in part 1, and then in part 2 he and Batman sort of work together to ultimately disarm this giant nuclear tidal wave machine, tale as old as time, as we like to say here, that Aquaman's evil brother Orm had created. So not as much for Jon to do this week, but we do again get to sort of reinforce that ultimate soldier persona that we're starting to see here, especially when he feels that the world, or in this case America especially, is being challenged by this outside force in his estimation, that being Aquaman and the people of Atlantis.
Yeah, I think the highlight for that is certainly the conflict with Aquaman. There's also a point in part 2 where as Batman has to decides, in order to disarm this nuclear submarine's core, he has to go inside the core. So Green Lantern actually encases him in his ring and kind of holds him in there, sort of struggling to keep his concentration while Batman is doing it, and climbs inside the reactor. But it's definitely not a starring role for Jon in this episode. It's very much an Aquaman episode. However, there is a lot of fun in the scenes that Jon does pop up in.
Absolutely. And then the next appearance Jon would make in the series is in the 2-part episode Injustice for All. Again, not a major role for him, but he is there along with all the other members of the Justice League, fighting against Lex Luthor's Injustice gang. And we do get another Green Lantern, a famous baddie in that one. Star Sapphire shows up for the first time. So not much to talk about from a character perspective there for Jon, but some fun sort of Justice League versus evil Justice League team battles in that one that you can enjoy, and Jon's part of those.
Yeah, it's not a lot. Again, that episode is very heavily focused on Lex Luthor. It's a Lex Luthor episode. There's some great Batman in there, but of course the Green Lantern does play a part. You can of course hear our review of this episode as well as The Enemy Below. We've covered both of those. The Enemy Below, you can hear that back on episode 32 of the podcast if you want to hear our full review. And then Injustice for All was episode 43.
Yeah, there you go. And then our next episode featuring Jon, actually one we talked about not too long ago, that being War World parts 1 and 2, which is obviously not if you've seen that one, not a hugely focused episode. It's mostly a Superman story, but it does feature, for posterity's sake, it does feature the first sort of on-screen pairing, first sparks flying moments between Jon Stewart and Hawkgirl.
Yeah, it's our first look at the two of them, which, as you mentioned, not too long ago. You can check out that episode in the archives on episode 187. But yeah, that episode is fun because it is their first pairing together. We talked about it a little bit. It does lay the groundwork. They are butting heads throughout the episode. I think most famously they are in I guess sort of like a space cab. They are arguing in the back about where they're going to go and how they're going to go about things. And that's when they're arguing so much that they don't realize that the sinister driver who's actually about to double cross them has rolled up a window in order to gas them and then dumps them on some strange planet where honestly they could have died, but thankfully they happened to land on the same trash planet that Draga was also jumped on. So by happenstance alone did they actually stumble their way onto actually helping out Superman. But yeah, it's not the best showing of teamwork between the two of them, but we know that that's obviously setting up that they're at each other's throats, because later on that will be quite the opposite of what happens to these two characters. But yeah, it's great because you set up that both of these characters, both him and Hawkgirl, which you can hear our volume 1 of Hawkgirl in the archives. Also, we've done a spotlight episode of her recently. You can check out more commentary on that. But it sets up that they're both very strong-willed, very strong opinionated, very opinionated characters, and butting heads here is sort of going to be what ultimately I feel like leads to them making a decent couple, because you have that strong-willed perseverance between the two of them to persevere, even though they end up running into some pretty serious couple trouble later on, as we know.
Absolutely. And from there we will move on to actually a couple of episodes we haven't covered yet, but thankfully for us, they don't feature too heavily into Jon's characterization. We have first up the Brave and the Bold parts 1 and 2, not the series. These 2 episodes, which are really more of a flash story focused on the introduction of Gorilla Grodd, as well as the Solovar and the rest of Gorilla City, not to be confused with Bird City, which is where Mr. Wing was from and was exiled from for being too radical. Really, Grodd really ripped him off, but
the deep cut there.
That's right.
For people that haven't listened to her. Yeah, check out our bonus episode coverages of Batman: The Adventures Continue while you're in the archives, checking out these older reviews if you really want to understand that reference.
There you go. It's a deep cut, but yes, as mentioned, it's more of a flash story, but we do see Jon sort of once again paired with Wally, whether he wants to be or not, and having to deal with the Flash being arrested for under the duress of mind control, stealing a chemical, and later on Jon having to work with some of the other Justice League members to try to stop a missile from crashing into Gorilla City. So not a lot to speak of from when it comes to Jon in that episode, but of course it does follow up on the Wally pairing. And hey, if that live action Flash movie ever comes out, we'll do a Flash month and we'll cover that episode.
Well, I heard they're showing clips of it, even though the star of the movie is seemingly in legal trouble every single weekend, and they haven't finished any of the special effects yet. So yeah, one day it'll come out, I hope.
And yes, and that's
It
when
might
we'll
just
cover
end up
that.
being a Batman movie, so we'll just
Yeah, there you go. We'll figure it out somewhere down the line. But speaking of ones that will probably be covered in a future character month, we do also have Jon appearing in Fury Parts 1 and 2, albeit briefly. He's one of the male Justice Leaguers who succumbs to the poison gas that only affects men on the planet Earth by the evil Amazon Arisia. Mostly a Wonder Woman story there, but Jon is present for that. Not much to say. Again, we will probably cover that down the line in a theoretical Wonder Woman month. But moving on from that, Cal, we get to probably I would say almost undoubtedly the one that holds the most special place in your heart, at least from season 1 of Justice League, and that would be Legends Parts 1 and 2, which features Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, The Flash, and Martian Manhunter being transported to seemingly back to the past, and then also they soon figure out another dimension where they meet a bunch of alternate versions of superheroes who Jon quickly recognizes as the characters from his favorite comic book from when he was a kid. And Jon gets to live out this unbelievable adventure with his real life superheroes.
That's right. Black Siren, Tom Turbine, the Streak, the Green Guardsman. These were the characters from his favorite comic book as a child. You know, it's a great episode. It's truly it. Again, it humanizes Jon Stewart. We learn even more so about who this character is. And we get to learn about who he was as a child, who he idolized as a child, and why, like, some of his characterization makeup because of these people that he looked up to. And it's one of those things where he gets to meet his heroes. And if you've ever, as a human being, have ever had the opportunity to meet a hero of yours, and it's they've turned out to be exactly who you'd hope they'd be, which doesn't happen all the time, but in the cases the cases that it does, it's a really special moment. And in this, it's a really fun episode to follow Jon, especially in that first part early on where he's working alongside these heroes and having so much fun doing so. But it doesn't last for him. And that's sort of the bittersweet tragedy of this character, and sort of mirrors his storyline throughout, is that he has these moments of joy that are just intermittently broken up and unfortunately spoiled by these moments of tragedy. Is he sort of begins to realize that something is off, something isn't adding up. And that's where we learn that he starts doing some research, he starts looking around, he realizes that things aren't adding up. There's constant distractions whenever he tries to get the bottom of things. He goes to libraries where there aren't any words written in the books. There's townspeople that seem to just show up all the time and seem to be trapped in certain ways. And there's a very emotional end of that part 1 where he discovers that all of the heroes are actually already dead. They find their graves. And part 2 is really him coming to grips.
Jon, I'm sorry.
You were right. They're gone. All of them.
Then who are those people back at the mansion? Robots? Clones?
I don't know. But I intend to get some answers.
Yeah, it's a really emotional beat, as you mentioned. At the end of part 1 ends with Hawkgirl discovering those graves and showing them to Jon, and then, as you mentioned, they sort of go on this adventure together as they're trying to figure out what exactly happened to this world, what is going on. They can't get anyone to answer questions, and ultimately they are as he has to confront this, and then these heroes being confronted with the fact that they are in fact not real, still choose to help them and save the Justice League, and give a fond farewell to Jon as they defeat this sort of magical, psychic, nuclear powered man child that's created this alternate reality. And they literally give their entire existence just so that the Justice League can survive and get home. And it's really dramatic. And the final scene, you talk about a moment that really helped to, I think, solidify the Jon and Shayera pairing is it's just in that final moments of the episode as Hawkgirl sees him sort of staring out into space back in the watchtower, and when he's sort of trying to play it off and say, well, I shouldn't be upset, they weren't even real, why do I feel this way? And she just, she puts her arms around him and just tells him that they gave their lives for us, and that's real enough.
You should have been there. It was so freaky. Those cornball villains with their bad puns, and the heroes with the decoder rings. What's up with that? Still, Black Siren was a hottie.
Where's GL? Are you okay?
It's stupid, really. Why should I feel like this? I mean, they weren't even real.
They gave their lives for us. That's real enough for me.
They just have this moment. It's a really profound, because it's one of those, it's not a happy ending for him, as you said. Like, that's as much fun as that adventure is as an episode. At the end, it comes down to this, like, what is what does it mean to be a hero, and what is it, what ultimately does fiction mean, to a person, and can that shape who a person is, and things like that. It deals with some pretty heady concepts, and really ends on a bit of a down note, but it's also a kind of a beautiful moment of Hawkgirl comforting him as he sort of has to come to terms with what these fictional beings meant to him, and what this adventure has done, and how it changed him.
Yeah, it is one of the few episodes I think you can probably count, maybe on two hands, but definitely at least on one hand, the amount of downer endings to certain episodes. And for whatever reason, across the entire DCAU catalog, and for whatever reason, those ones tend to have more of a lasting impact, I feel like, as an adult, just because it makes it feel more real. Like, not every story has a happy ending, and humanizes the characters. It makes, it allows those characters to show other emotions of disappointment and grief and sadness. And that final scene is a perfect example, and it really does set up that pairing between Jon and Shayera. Shayera actually gets to comfort Jon in those moments. And it to me, despite it not being a happy ending, it is the perfect ending for that episode. And if you want to hear our entire review of that episode, I invite you to check that out. It's episode 44 in the archives, so it's quite a while ago, but it's a good one, and ranked pretty high in our scores for the both of us, from my recollection. So definitely invite you to check that one out when you get some time, because that's it's a fun episode. It's one that I'll always revisit every couple of years, if not every year or so. And it's a great showcase for Jon, because it allows him, again, you get him being the superhero, but then him also being a detective at times, and him being concerned and figuring out and getting to the bottom of just what is causing all of this, and recognizing that even though he's having so much fun, that he can't put that in front of the fact that there's something that's clearly not right in this creepy sort of Stepford wife type universe that they find themselves in. So yeah, it's a sort of a launching pad, again, because of the way that Shayera ends up comforting him, to allow that Hawk Lantern relationship to continue to grow.
Absolutely. And we would see a little bit more of that focused on in the next episode that Jon featured in, that being Metamorphosis Parts 1 and 2, which is another one we covered not too long ago, but it focuses not only on Jon, his relationship with this friend of his, Rex Mason. He sort of reconnects with this old Marine buddy of his, and he sort of starts to wonder a little bit about the road less traveled, as find out that this guy Mason has gotten out of the service and is married or is engaged to a beautiful woman and is working in this nice job and seems to have everything that maybe at one point Jon would have pictured for himself, and he even sort of confides as much in Hawkgirl as in the middle of them stopping some bank robbers. He's sort of remarking how he still thinks about occasionally what would have happened if he hadn't accepted the ring and he hadn't sort of thrown aside one uniform and taken up another. If his life could have been different as well.
Well, that was pretty darn sloppy.
Sorry.
Care to talk about it?
Running into Mason after all these years, I guess it got me thinking, wondering about the choices I've made.
The road not taken?
Yeah. Maybe I could have been like him. Wealthy, successful.
Engaged to a beautiful woman?
It's Mace. Are you all right?
Jon, we have to talk.
Before Jon can really even grapple with those thoughts and feelings, his friend Rex is transformed, and of course into the other DC hero Metamorpho, who is very angry with Jon and the Justice League, and in fact pretty almost single-handedly defeats them. As he's quite powerful and kind of uniquely gifted in ways that he can hurt the Justice League, and ultimately it comes down to Jon and really Metamorpho himself having to put aside their differences and realize that they're kind of being played by the evil Simon Stagg, who he himself gets transformed into this giant green and chemical monster. Once again, a tale as old as time. And this part 2 really just becomes a big punch up between the Justice League and this chemo monster like Simon Stagg. But we do get some interesting little tidbits of Jon Stewart maybe wondering if he's made all the right decisions in his life that have led him to this point.
Yeah, more character building, more giving you background, and certainly an interesting question, because as we've mentioned, we know that Clark Kent has his own life as a reporter, and is happy with what he does. Living as Clark Kent is what brings him the most joy. We find out so often in whatever iteration, but certainly the DCAU version of Clark Kent / Superman. Batman has his outlet and the things that he does. Even though we know Batman is the character, Bruce Wayne is the mask, he still does help Gotham in the form of Bruce Wayne and charities and the things that he is able to do. Clearly doesn't have to worry about money, doesn't have to worry about his spending time with women should he decide that that's something that he wants to pursue. It's just not on his radar. But for Jon, he went from being a soldier to then being essentially a space soldier after that. So being able to stop and think and wonder, is the sacrifice worth it? Did he miss out on a different life because he chose to sacrifice and give up his own life in exchange for serving the country and then serving the galaxy, essentially, and what that would look like. It's a really human thing to sit there and wonder and to constantly question our decisions that we've made in our lives. And I think that's very, very natural. And because of that, it makes this character with a ring that creates constructs of whatever he thinks about, or shoots green laser blasts, depending on what season of the Justice League it is. It humanizes him and makes him relatable. So, and this is another one of those episodes where, he has a buddy, he's comparing his life to this buddy and wondering, and as you mentioned, that open dialogue that he has with Hawkgirl as to whether or not, this was the right choice for him, or whether or not he should have settled down at some point. But then ultimately at the end, he kind of, I feel like, is rewarded because he teams up with Metamorpho, and we get this opportunity for them to work together, and they're stopping this giant monster and realizing that, hey, he is making a difference in a way that a lot of people wouldn't ever have the opportunity to do so. So I feel like he's rewarded a little bit in the end with being able to work with his friend to defeat the monster. So yeah, it's a good episode. It certainly features and is more heavy on the metamorpho side of things because it was used as an opportunity to introduce that character. But John's story running parallel and being intertwined with Rex Mason's origin there is definitely very important.
Absolutely. And that'll bring us to our final episodes of season 1 here of Justice League, where our episode portion will end here for volume 1. That being, of course, the epic 3-part World War II adventure, The Savage Time. Jon, along with 5 of the other members of the Justice League, all except Batman, are sort of caught in this time, this sort of weird energy pulse as they're returning home, and it seems only because of the Green Lantern's ring they are not affected by what they clearly figure out pretty quickly has been some sort of time travel shenanigans that have resulted in among other things, the Nazis having won World War II, and this man, Vandal Savage, controlling the entire Earth, it seems, with an iron fist. And after meeting with a sort of resistance, an anti-fascist, if you will, Batman, meeting up and them going and finding this strange time portal, Jon and the rest of the League go back to the past to sort of right those wrongs. But as they're dealing with getting some soldiers out of Dodge in a particular battle, Jon's power ring dies, and Hawkgirl sort of has a choice to make, and Jon encourages her to take these soldiers and save their lives and not to worry about him. But in the aftermath, he's sort of wiped out and buried under some rubble, and is seemingly lost to the rest of the League. And Jon's behind enemy lines, as it were, with no power ring and no way to recharge. And he does in fact find some other soldiers, and in fact he finds a group of some wonderful DC World War II characters make their appearances throughout this episode, but none perhaps more memorable than that being Sergeant Rock and Easy Company, who team up with Jon as they take down some of Savage's weapons plants. And in fact, Jon ends up on Savage's ship as the sort of final battle presents itself. So a lot for Jon to do here, and once again, this time getting to show who he is as a soldier and as a man and as a hero, even when he doesn't have his magical ring that can even without the ability to fly or shoot green lasers, he's still shown to be a hero and one heck of a soldier across these 3 episodes.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really solidifies his heart for being a hero. It really makes it very clear that it's certainly the man that makes the ring, not the ring that makes the man. And there is some great opportunities that we have with GL as GL in this episode. We see him go up against the War Wheels in the I believe it's in part 2, and we have that leads to the sort of culmination of him being left behind by Hawkgirl, as he's actually more concerned, and that again reveals the heart of him as a soldier in those moments battling these War Wheels. Hawkgirl attempts to sort of carry GL out because his ring has died, and he insists or is dying, and he insists that she get the soldiers out and that he'll be fine. This, of course, causes conflict between Hawkgirl and Flash later on, as Flash can't believe that she bothered to leave Green Lantern behind. But it is really a great opportunity to learn about Jon, who he was in his life prior to being a Green Lantern, and it creates more depth for the character as we see he really befriends and becomes a part of this unit that Sergeant Rock leads. And there is some initial sort of there's some friction that occurs between him and a couple of the members, but he's quickly embraced by them and really becomes a major part of that force that, as you mentioned, leads to them getting aboard Vandal Savage's ship in for the culmination of the episode. So yeah, it's a fun episode, and really that whole third part or third act of the movie, if you will, or the third part of the episode, depending on how you look at it or watched it originally, is an interesting way to present this character, because he's Green Lantern, but he doesn't have his powers for the entire basic third
We've cased
part.
the whole area. Maybe GHQ got some bad info.
Yeah, wouldn't be the first time.
Or maybe the map's no good.
You're right. This hill isn't even on it. I wonder.
You're so smart. Why don't you go find a runway with your magic ring?
Enough of that, Dozer.
Sarge, you almost got us killed. What do we need you for anyway? You're a big man when your ring's working, but without it, you're just... Ah!
What in blazes?
I thought so. The hill's a phony. That's why it wasn't on the map. There's your runway.
Yeah, I love that portrayal and that opportunity that they gave this character to showcase that it's more about the person wielding the ring than it is about the ring that makes him a formidable hero.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, it's a great episode. It has some really fun characterization moments for a lot of our different Justice Leaguers, but certainly Jon gets to play a big part. And as you mentioned, Hawkgirl gets to swoop in at the last minute to save him. We get a nice little moment there to sort of just hammer home that there's something growing there between them as we wrap up season 1. So yeah, that will wrap up the episode portion. A lot of strong season 1. I think season 1 of Justice League is often thought of by most fans, and maybe comparatively speaking, it is the weakest of the Justice League runs here. But I gotta say, like, from what we've just talked about, for Jon, he might have one of the strongest string of episodes in a season 1 for Justice League, at least that we've talked about so far. He had a lot of big important moments, and it feels like we know a lot more about this character, and he feels more important, and we care more about what happens to him from when we met him in part 2 of Secret Origins to where we find him in part 3 of A Savage Time. So a lot of good character growth across this first season.
Yeah, I think we ran into something similar when we talked about Hawkgirl in Volume 1. We just covered her first season there of Justice League as well. And while we did get some feedback and could definitely see the critique that Hawkgirl's storyline relied heavily on Jon, and they didn't do as much character development for her. And I think some of that may have been because they knew or had in mind this idea that they couldn't reveal too much about this character because of what was coming with Starcrossed, maybe. And that maybe they didn't want to flesh out too much about who this character was. Right or wrong, a lot of her character development in that first season was certainly built around her relationship with Jon. Jon, however, I feel like while his relationship with Hawkgirl was certainly part of that foundation of learning about who he is and what, eventually what his storyline goes on to sort of lay out there. I think that we certainly get a lot more development for him in learning about his past, who he is at his core, and certainly, creating a character sort of out of nothing here that a lot of people didn't know about or wouldn't have known about, and creating a love for this character. A lot of people, we polled a lot of people, I think in Green Lantern month, a year or so ago, maybe 2 years now, on our Instagram. And there were a lot of people that pick Jon Stewart as their Green Lantern for this reason, because he isn't just a one-dimensional character. He isn't just a guy with a ring. He has a heart. There's a lot that we learn about him. There's future episodes, of course, in Justice League Season 2 and Justice League Unlimited that continue that development. There's a Static Shock episode that we learn even more about Jon in that we have yet to cover, but there's more coming. So there's in Volume 2, we'll talk more about, that further development here. But I agree with you for what is looked at, and rightfully so at times. I think maybe storytelling wise, that first season being a little bit the weakest of the Justice League stories, it does for certain characters, it does set up what you needed to for the rest of the series to go forward, and for those characters, especially Jon Stewart, to be such a major player in those upcoming seasons, and then the subsequent Justice League Unlimited seasons.
That is right, Cal. So that will, as we said, that will wrap up volume 1 as far as the episodes that we'll be talking about. But before we wrap up our episode here, we do have a few more notes we want to touch on. One being the music of the Green Lantern Corps, and that would again go back to In Brightest Day, the Superman episode. The theme that is sort of created there by Michael McQuistion in that episode is then used by Mr. McQuistion, as well as his dynamic music partners, Christopher Carter and Lolita Ritmanis, as the theme that we sort of play that seems maybe as that's Kyle's theme in that episode really becomes the all-purpose Green Lantern Corps theme, as it's used for not only for Jon throughout many of his episodes across Justice League, but even when Kyle and some of the other Green Lantern Corps members come back later on in Justice League Unlimited, which we'll certainly talk about, it's sort of brought back again. So Mr. McQuistion really creates like this beautiful, it's a little, I guess maybe a bit Star Trek-y, I feel like is maybe how we described it at the time. It's very Space Odyssey soundtrack. It's a beautiful piece of music, and it's great galaxy exploring music, and it starts there and In Brightest Day, and then is sort of used as the refrain for Jon throughout his subsequent series as well.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely there's a little Star Wars in there too. There's a little bit of that soaring exploration of foreign galaxies. Definitely is sort of the image that you get as you hear that piece come in. But yeah, it was so good that they even brought it back for the Justice League versus the Fatal Five and used it in some of the music in that. There's hints of it played again. So yeah, it's a great piece. Mr. McQuistion did a great composition there. It's one that I believe when we even talked about In Brightest Day, it's like, man, this would have been great to hear as a theme for an animated series. You could just hear credits playing over top of that, and getting getting some clips played over it for a GLTAS, not that GLTAS, but a DCAU Green Lantern the Animated Series, if you will. So yeah, that it's a great piece of music, one that when you hear it, and it's one that's layered and used in different spots throughout the animated series, and brought back again for Justice League, and later, of course, in Justice League Unlimited, as you mentioned. But yeah, it's a nice piece. It's one that's memorable, and one that, again, I love the fact that they kept the continuity of the music. They bring that piece back, and it's a great piece. It fits this character. It fits who we know as I've mentioned already, the space cops, the space police, whatever you want to call them. It fits that idea, and it's a great composition. So yeah, a very memorable piece for Mr. McQuistion, and not surprising that they kept bringing it back, because it was done so well.
Absolutely. And from here, we will talk about voice acting. Now, obviously, we have one voice actor in particular that we will chat about more at length, but we will mention some of the other Green Lantern voices we heard. We do get Mr. Michael Rosenbaum as Arcus Chummock briefly in Blackest Night, always pulling double and triple duty, that Rosenbaum. We have Renee Aubergenois as Gallius, who plays sort of, as we said, more of a more pompous Green Lantern, sort of representing the Corps, very willing to throw Jon under the bus. Has some fun, sort of memorable moments, as we mentioned with Hawkgirl, especially. We also in Brightest Day, we have Peter Mark Richmond voicing Abin Sur very briefly before his untimely demise. And we have Michael P. Greco playing Kyle Raynor. Now, obviously, when Kyle Raynor comes back, he is not voiced by this gentleman again. But for that episode, I do remember enjoying Mr. Greco's performance as just sort of this, as you said, this sort of hapless artist who's just way out of his depth, kind of from minute one, and then finally sort of is accepting his destiny with the help of Superman towards the end there. I think he does a good job in that episode.
Yeah, and there's certainly some reluctance, as you mentioned, his hesitation, his disbelief of being worthy of carrying this ring around, and he has some interactions with Jimmy Olsen in that episode that are pretty funny from my recollection. And yeah, it's a good episode, and the fact that he's sort of brought up by Tim Daly's Superman at the end to sort of believe that he actually is worthy of this and he'll make a good Green Lantern in the end is great. Yeah, he is replaced later on by some unknown actor when he comes back in Justice League Unlimited, but that's for volume 2.
That is right, Cal. And speaking of Justice League, here in season 1, we also had Dennis Haysbert, great actor.
You're in good hands with Allstate.
That's right. President from 24, I believe, as well, and several other roles, but a very memorable voice playing Kilowog. He also gets a little bit more time to shine in a season 2 episode, but he does, as we said, get a moment to sort of stand up for Jon when the rest of the Corps is willing to kind of throw him to the dogs there. So it's a fun little bit of characterization we get for Kilowog there. And then, of course, we have the main event. We have Phil LaMarr himself, an absolute legend in voice acting. It's one of those things when we talk about really any of our main Justice League actors, but I mean, between Phil LaMarr doing this, of course, also the voice of Static, we talk about Phil LaMarr and how talented he is as a voice actor a lot. So it can be hard to find new things to say about it. But I think revisiting season 1, I appreciate, one, that he kind of nailed it right out of the gate as far as what he wanted that voice to be. As we said, the very soldier, authoritative nature of the way he speaks, especially in those episodes. And then then in those softer moments when he sort of lets that veneer crack and we see the man underneath the soldier doing his duty, I think he's able to show a lot of warmth and vulnerability, certainly whether he's talking with the Flash in Blackest Night, or obviously some of these episodes that we mentioned when he's dealing with Maria Canals-Pereira as Hawkgirl. Just he gets a lot to do, I think, in the softer moments as well. None more so than probably what we've already talked about a little bit there in Legends, as he has to go through so many different emotions in that one. Not only is just the super heroic moments, the sort of the kid inside of him being reignited when he gets to meet these comic book heroes he loved, and then sort of having to say goodbye to all of them at the same time. It's really quite, as you said, the mix of pure joy and then utter tragedy that he has to convey across those 2 episodes is really stunning.
Yeah. As you mentioned, we talk about him a lot. I don't know that I can add anything more to the superlatives that you just used. He's fantastic, and I think you're right. Looking at laying the groundwork for who this character is going to be, dipping into the sternness of the character, the seriousness of the character, but also showing some lightheartedness at various different times. Especially in the Legends episode, and being able to show emotion when called upon in the Metamorpho episode, or it's a dynamic performance from a dynamic actor who is tasked with really filling out a character that a lot of people didn't know. So you're creating ultimately what is going to be the performance that is, whether he knew it or not, is judged upon that character for the majority of the next several decades, because those kids like us that grew up listening or watching these cartoons are going to judge future Jon Stewart performances based on his performance that he gave as this character. And I gotta say, they got big shoes to fill in trying to fill that character. So maybe that may be why we really haven't seen that character tried outside of some of the other DCA animated movies, perhaps tried to replicate, because it's a tall task. He's a legend. He's a voice acting legend, and this is certainly one of the tippy tops of his resume, in my opinion. And he's definitely somebody, a dream guest reviewer, guest correspondent that I would love to have on the podcast if we were fantasy booking it here at one day. It would be great to have him on to review an episode with us.
Fingers crossed. But yeah, that's I think that's about all that we can possibly say about him, and until next week when we have to talk about him again, and then we'll try it all over again. But it's a good problem to have this many good performances by the same actor, and yes, he's an absolute legend. So as we begin to wrap up, we're not going to cover the whole swath of merchandise just because we want to save a little bit for volume 2 of this when we cover maybe his season 2 adventures. But we will mention that Kyle actually in his Superman the Animated Series look did get one piece of merchandise, that being a DC Direct / DC Collectibles maquette with from Superman the Animated Series, was made of him. That's the only piece. It's funny that with all these guest characters that got introduced in the second half of those Superman episodes, Kenner was kind of asleep at the wheel, unless they just didn't have the rights. But because I know sometimes it can be they only have like character specific rights, but man, we didn't get any of those fun guest characters appearing in those lines.
You would have figured they would, because there was simultaneous Justice League or Total Justice and all these other characterizations that were happening at the same time that included Justice League characters, from my recollection. So yeah, it's a wonder that they didn't go, hey, let's also make an Aquaman and a Green Lantern and Legion of Superheroes and all these other fun characters, instead of making 34 Supermen in different variations of his costume that never existed. But sure. I'm not a toy executive, and I guess that's they're far smarter than I am. They probably sold they've definitely sold more toys in their lifetime than I have. So can't put that on my resume. But yes, disappointing again. DC Collectibles / DC Direct's demise, and not being, they did one set of Superman the Animated Series figures. If they had gone outside of that, and who's to say whether it was because that set didn't sell well or because they didn't know. There was, I know, at some point rumors of them doing a second or a first series of Superman Animated Series figures, and that unfortunately did not come to fruition because of them shuttering the doors. But hey, we could cross our fingers that maybe Todd McFarlane and McFarlane Toys dip their toes into maybe working on some of those designs one day, or if not a future company dropping some of the Superman the Animated Series, specifically Kyle Raynor, that version of Kyle in plastic one day.
Absolutely, fingers crossed. But thankfully, where Kenner maybe dropped the ball here, we did not have such an issue with Mattel when they got the Justice League license. We'll cover John's figures here. I believe he had 3 of the regular size figure releases here. We have the Series 1, which is just sort of, as I think we talked about in the Hawkgirl Spotlight episode. He was one of the 6 that came out in that first set that had the stand that spelled out Justice League if you put them all together. Poor Shaira got left out of that first set, but
the lenticular card, and did he come with a lantern? I don't remember if he had the lantern or not.
I believe we might be looking at one of the later ones that came with that, because we did have. So yes, we have that Series 1. Not a lot of accessories in that first set, but then we do have attack armor Green Lantern, which at least came with a sort of an energy bubble you could put him in. You had to pose the figure a very specific way, because it was just 2 pieces of plastic with like clasps on it that you could clip together. But that's I think that's one we also happened to pick up when we were kids. So we did at least start to get some accessories here in this Justice League line. But and then later on we had a set that I would not have remembered existed, the Cyber Trackers, which is just like they're begging that JLU line to come out so they can stop having to release the same 6 or 7 characters over and over again in weird costumes. We do have one more sort of deluxe edition Green Lantern there that came with some fancy accessories. And then of course, like a lot of them, maybe arguably the best of all of these early Justice League, regular Justice League Mattel releases, the 12-inch figure is pretty darn great.
Yeah, that's probably the best representation. All of those Justice League 12-inch figures. Well, I guess they're a little bit smaller than 12-inch. They're like 10-inch, I think. But those figures are all tremendous sculpts, and were based on, they were slightly articulated versions from my understanding of the Warner Brothers maquettes. So they're based on just some incredible sculpts that were based on the turnarounds from Bruce Timm and the original, I guess, drawings and storyboard artists that did the turnarounds for the series. So they went right to the source material, and because of that, they're some of the most accurate and true to source figures that were made and produced. So yeah, that's a good one. Those are actually still relatively inexpensive. I encourage you, maybe a couple years ago I went and got the whole collection for what amounted to less than $100. So they look good. If you don't have a lot of room, they don't take up a ton of space. Also, that whole Mattel collection can get really, really expensive, especially and take up a lot of space based on the amount of figures they ended up releasing. But if you're looking for a cool centerpiece for maybe your Justice League collection or DCAU collection, those 10-inch Mattel figures are pretty easy to come by and look pretty good sitting on a shelf. So yeah, that Green Lantern is a good one. Also, he's a little shorter, I think, than he should be. He's a little diminutive in my opinion, but hey, it's still a good looking figure overall.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that one's I think those early Mattel ones, like I said, they really, and we'll certainly get to that in future volumes when we get into the Justice League Unlimited lines, they do end up ultimately nailing, I think, most of at least the main Justice Leaguers. There's certainly some scaling issues with some other characters that we'll get to down the line, but yeah, I think those are of those early, just Justice League branded Mattel figures. I definitely think that 10-inch one stands out, and it's just for the likeness and how spot on it is. But yeah, as far as the rest of the merch, of course, Jon did have several statues, maquettes, as well as other DC collectibles and Eagle Moss figurines and figures. So we will cover those more in depth in a future volume. So we have some extracurriculars to talk about next time as well. But yeah, overall, I think as we begin to look towards the end of this volume 1, it's a pretty, as we said, a pretty strong start for the Green Lantern, even if the overall season 1 of Justice League is not as fondly remembered. Some pretty good, strong moments for Jon and Kyle as well, getting to sort of kick us all off back in Superman. So some fun, a very fun trip down memory lane to some of our previous reviews, and some things to look forward to in the future as well.
Absolutely. I definitely look forward to covering volume 2, where we'll get into more of the Hawk Lantern storyline. We'll talk a little bit more about additional members of the Green Lantern Corps that are highlighted, including a love interest for Jon from the past. So lots of stuff coming up when we cover volume 2 in the future at some point. So lots of stuff to go on there, in addition to all the merchandise and toys and things that we didn't cover. But had a lot of fun covering this one, Liam. Definitely a character in Jon Stewart and the Green Lantern Corps that obviously are pretty well known as far as DC characters are concerned, and pretty pivotal to the latter half of the DCAU and central to a lot of the storylines that happened in both the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. So well worth at least 2 volumes, if not more. So looking forward to covering another volume, and glad to have been able to cover volume 1 with you.
Absolutely, Cal. These are always fun. And we want to, of course, leave this out to our listeners, whether if you follow us on Instagram or on Twitter, you can connect with us on both of those platforms at DCAU Review. We want to hear what your favorite Green Lantern moment is from these early episodes. Is it Kyle's first appearance there in Superman the Animated Series? Is it one of Jon's adventures throughout the first season of Justice League? If you have thought on figures or anything else, any of those other things, we didn't really touch on many of the tie-in comics. Another thing we'll probably save for a future volume there, but certainly Jon had some memorable appearances there as well. So would definitely love to hear what stands out to you among these early Green Lantern adventures, and definitely reach out to us again at DCAU Review and let us know what you think.
Absolutely. You can follow us at DCAU Review on Twitter and Instagram. Interact with us. Liam, it's been a fun month. Been having a lot of fun covering these episodes with you. But we are turning the calendar page, and that means we're headed to cover a new series starting next week.
That is right, Cal, and we alluded to it a couple times throughout this episode. But speaking of Phil Lamar, we have not visited the sunny skies of Dakota too recently, and so we will be headed back to cover another month's worth of Static Shock episodes starting next week.
Looking forward to doing that, Liam. Of course, the good people can support us and subscribe to our podcast on different platforms as well.
Absolutely. If you listen to us, whether it's on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or any of those other podcast apps that you may be using, if it gives you the ability to rate us and give us 5 stars or leave us a review, we would certainly appreciate that. That does help us out a lot as far as getting our show bumped up in those all important algorithms that control all of our lives. And we would certainly appreciate you. We know that's a little bit of a time commitment, but we do appreciate those that take the time to do that. And if you'd like to support us a bit more directly, you can visit DCAUreview.com. We have a shop set up there where you could go pick yourself up a hat or a shirt or a mug or what have you, a sticker, whatever you can whenever you can pick up, whatever you'd like to pick up and can afford. We always appreciate that as well. And as we've mentioned, a free way to support us as well is also to not only follow us on our social medias at DCAU Review, but you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are part of the Pod Tower YouTube channel, along with our friends from the Watchtower database, as well as our friends at Tim Talk also put content there. So you could subscribe to us, give us a like, a favorite, and subscribe to that channel. Help us and our friends that grow that way as well. We would appreciate however you choose to support us. We always appreciate that, and as we said, we love interacting with all of you, and hopefully you will continue to interact with us as we move on from this month of Justice League and head back to the sunny skies of Dakota and visit the Static Shock in the month of May. But that's next week, and until then, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll be back soon with another episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.